Greetings to all and a warm welcome to our latest live webcast, Your License to Create Licenses. We're thrilled you've decided to join us for this enlightening masterclass. With each episode, we provide new highlights, technical tips, and success stories that will leave you inspired and ready to get your protection, licensing, and security techniques another step closer to perfection. At WIBU-SYSTEMS, we empower software publishers and intelligent device manufacturers with cutting-edge technologies, new business models, and tailor-made consulting training. Let us help you upgrade, optimize, and automate your entire license lifecycle management so you can focus on monetizing your business at a higher level. My name is Daniela Previtali, Global Marketing Director at WIBU-SYSTEMS, and I'm delighted to have you here with us today. We are joined by Rüdiger Kügler, VP Professional Services and Security Expert, and Jörg Jans, Professional Services, both from the headquarters of WIBU-SYSTEMS. To give you a roadmap for today's session, here is what we'll be covering. Driving without a license remains a fantasy, even with advanced AI and autonomous technologies. Like fine-tuning a race car for peak performance, CodeMeter License Central lets you steer the course of your software licenses. Master the essential settings for efficient operations and customize them to your needs, ensuring smooth, precise system alignment. Whether implementing new firm codes, configuring license settings or support processes, or setting up license containers, managing your licenses has never been easier. Before we dive into the content, let's quickly address a few housekeeping items. For all of you tuning in today, we've set aside a special segment at the end of the session exclusively for Q&A. We warmly encourage you to drop your questions into the live chat box as they come to mind. If we can't get to your question during the live discussion, rest assured we'll make it a priority to engage with you individually at a later time to address your queries. This session is being recorded, and a link to the on-demand replay will be sent straight to your inbox within the next couple of days. This way, you can revisit the insights shared today at your leisure. And don't forget, stick around for the entire live session and seize the opportunity to win an invaluable 4 hours of personalized CodeMeter consultation with our industry-leading experts. As the webinar concludes, a new browser tab will automatically open, presenting you with a quick quiz. We'll randomly select a lucky winner from those who answer correctly and make the big announcement when we release the webinar replay. Kindly note that if you win, you'll be ineligible for any other prize draws we host in 2024. Be also aware that this brief questionnaire includes additional questions aimed at gauging the quality of this masterclass. While these questions are optional, your valuable feedback will empower us to enhance the quality of our offerings and tailor our online events more precisely to meet your specific needs. And now, without any more delay, I'm delighted to hand over the reins to Rüdiger. The stage is all yours.
Daniela, thank you very much for this nice introduction. And I also like to welcome you together with my colleague, Jörg Jans, for the next hour to go through the settings of License Central. And typically when we have a project, then sometimes there's the expectation of our partners and customers, I want to use License Central and I expect everything works perfect. But let's take a look. Either you have a huge amount of low-cost software, then we have, of course, different support processes. And if you have a business software where we sell a few hundreds per year. And that's why we have different basic settings which can be used in License Central to make License Central fitting perfectly to your support processes, to your sales processes. And that's why we do this webinar today to show you how to fine-tune License Central, either if you want to drive with your car off-road or on the street, if you want to drive fast or comfortable. License Central can offer all of this. And so let's take a look how we can configure License Central that it fits perfectly to your needs. In the first step, we will show you how to import a new firm code. So we start with a fresh CodeMeter License Central. There are two different ways for CodeMeter License Central. One is you can get the on-premise version that you install on your system. In this case, you need to import or do the import process. If you decide to go for the software as a service solution, where we, our WOPS team, is providing the complete license center for you, WOPS will already do this. In the next step, we will show you how to configure the available firm codes or your firm code, go through the container type settings and to the global settings for license creation and, as mentioned, for the support processes. And with this, let's start with a live demonstration.
Yeah, welcome from my side as well. As Rüdiger said, we start with a freshly installed CodeMeter Internet edition and CodeMeter License Center Internet Edition. And we skip the setup process. That's quite easy. You download a pre-configured VM image from our homepage, and then you install a second file, and the second file must be then imported into the VM, and therefore you can refer to the documentation. The tool which you do this is the WebMin. It's a web interface running on the same machine on port 10,000, and you see already on the screen where you can do this, and importing this file is quite easy. This file comes from us, will be sent out if you order a new firm code, and with every new firm code you get the corresponding CmFirm WBC file, and then you just need to import this file. But we should first take a look at CodeMeter License Center in the completely empty state to spot the difference afterwards. If you install our image, you always have 3 firm codes pre-installed, 10, 5,000, 10, and 6 million 10. Those are our demo firm codes. And of course, you don't work with them because everybody would be able to create licenses with those firm codes. And so they are really for testing and demo purposes. And therefore, you need to make your firm code known to CodeMeter License Center, and this is done with this importing step, which is in the SaaS solution done by WOPS automatically. So Rüdiger selected a file, imported it, then you get a notice, and if you refresh this page, you see now there is a new one, professional services, but it's still not active. It's only imported into the CodeMeter section of the runtime, and you still need to enable it in CodeMeter License Center, and this is done quite easily. You need to go to the pencil in this line. Rüdiger wants to show one thing first. As I said, completely empty CodeMeter License Center, so we currently have nothing, no container types, no items, and only the 3 pre-installed firm codes. And now we just activate the freshly imported firm code. The name you see there, professional services, comes from this WBC file, which is usually set by WIBU during the order process, depending on your company name, but you can change it at any time you want. Those names are then used as preset for example, in the container types. So you can change the name, you can change the description, but to be honest, I never did this in my projects. I don't even change anything what comes next with the max activation count and the blocking period, which Rüdiger will explain to you.
Yeah, and as I mentioned before, let's take the different use cases, a huge amount of low-cost software, or let's say a few hundreds of business software. And these settings that you see here, max activation count and blocking period, are there so that you can fine-tune your support process. So for instance, if you sell huge amounts of low-cost software, you want to minimize your support. And this means if a license gets broken, if a license gets lost, so maybe you're using CmAct licenses, which is a license file on the computer crashes and the file is lost, is removed accidentally, is broken, something like this. In this case, for low-cost software, you want to give the customer the option to activate on a fresh computer once again, 2 times again, 3 times again. You want maybe that the user can do this once per year, once every 6 months, something like this. If you have a high-price software, then maybe you say, oh, I don't want the customer to activate it twice. I want to make sure that it can only be activated once. And if the customer loses the computer, then he needs to call me, and then I can authorize a second activation. So these are the default settings here. The max activation count means I can have one activation plus the amount of reactivations. So if I say 3, it is 1 activation and 2 reactivations. So this is the max activation count. It's the amount of activation plus reactivations. And the blocking period is the time until the user gets the next one. So let's say the blocking period is, for instance, 6 months. This means I have one activation, I do it. Everything is fine. I'm losing the computer, and after half a year, I would be able to immediately activate the license on a second computer doing this reactivation. The old one gets marked as stolen, as lost, as no longer valid. And after the next half year, I could redo this. This doesn't count or this doesn't sum up. So if I don't do this for 10 years, I would not have 20 reactivations because I get only one after the 6 months, and then it starts again with 0, 1. So it's toggling only between 1 and 0 if the blocking period is over. And so these are two generic settings. So for, let's say, business software, expensive software, medium price software, the default settings are very okay. So 1 activation and a blocking period of 0. And with this, we have the firm code settings. And when I click on OK, what happens, Jörg?
In this case, all supported CmContainer types will be created automatically in CodeMeter License Central with chosen preset of values. And you see in case of universal firm code, there are 3 supported container types. If you have a dongle only, it would only 1 additional container type, and same with the CM Act only license. But the universal firm code supports CM Cloud, CM Dongle, and CM Act license, and therefore you have 3 predefined container types. And now let's take a look into those 3 and start with the CM dongle, because that's the easiest of all, because it can only be 1 dongle container type. You can have multiple firm codes in 1 CM dongle, but you can only create 1 container type for every firm code. We will see with the next 2 that that is different there. And then you can create a name, but this name is only be shown in CodeMeter License Central on the item configuration, for example, but you don't see it somewhere on the customer side during the activation process in the UI. And therefore, you can choose a name which is more explainable or explains more than universal firm code CM dongle 6,947, because those are usually things which end user cannot do something with. And we very often use CM dongle without firm code, and then it's good for us.
Yeah, in case you're using multiple firm codes for testing and for production, then you could, if you have this one license center, you could name this production and test, at least testing test. And Jörg forgot to mention that the dongle has a fixed value of the CM Act ID 1000. But let's come to the CM Act ID with the next setting. So this is the cloud container. So that's the second one. And the cloud container has the same settings. It has a name. It has the firm code 6,947. So my firm code, our firm code. It's usable for cloud CM Act ID, which starts with 3. And then we can add the CM Act license ID. The name CM Act license ID is due to historical reasons. It was firstly introduced with the CM Act container. And this is also the name in the API, and making incompatible changes of the API has a lot of impact on already existing programs. That's why we made a decision not to change it in the API, and having something differently in the API in the user interface is also not a good idea. And that's why we decided to keep the name CM Act license ID even for a cloud container. And here you can enter fixed values that we, WIBU-SYSTEMS, provide to you. And the value is dependent on the region of the cloud. So we offer different regions where we provide the cloud servers for you. Currently, there are two: region Frankfurt, Germany, Europe. And in Europe, the CmAct ID is 3000, fixed, defined by us. And we offer Asia, and in Asia, the CmAct ID is 3100. And so if you want to use the cloud server in Europe, you need to use the 3000. If you want to use the cloud server in Asia, you need to use 3100. And if you want to use both, then of course you need to create a second container type with the second CmAct ID. I would give it the name Europe. I would copy the name because I don't want to type everything. And then I would create a second container type with the name Asia. So the CmAct it must be usable for the 3000X, and the 3100 is the defined value for the cloud server in Asia. Now we have two container types for CM cloud containers or the server in Asia and in Europe, and then you can define if this customer can choose between both regions. Then you add both regions to your item, and then the customer can choose which region he wants to use, or you can add only one region, and then the customer is got stick to this region and can only use this region. So at the end, it is your decision which region is available for which customer.
Yeah, and as Rüdiger said, those CmAct license IDs are fixed. They will always start with a 3 for CM Cloud, and then the next letter defines the region: 0 for Europe, 1 for Asia, and there will be at least a third one with 2 for the United States. And this is something we define, and you must use exactly those values which we provided. Totally different pattern with the CmAct license, which has the CmAct license ID as well. In this case, Rüdiger said it was the origin, the CmAct license ID for the software-bound container types, and they start with 2000. And it's not only numbers, you can use letters as well. So it goes from 2000 to 2CCC. And you can choose the number randomly as long as it starts with a 2. If you don't enter something, CodeMeter License Central will just increment it and take the next free slot. But for special purposes, I sometimes use predefined CmAct license IDs, and then you just enter it. The only thing you need to keep in mind is that the combination firm code and CmAct license ID should be unique, so that during the activation process, you know exactly which container type this license refers to, and that's the only thing you need to know. The next field, CmAct license name, is the one that is shown in Control Center in CodeMeter on the customer side. So the first name is only used inside of CodeMeter License Central and will be visible during the activation process if configured in Web Depot. But the second name is the one your customer will see in his local installation, and therefore you should name that your customer can know or can recognize, so that he knows exactly this is a license container from your company for your software. The activation method defines which way a license can be activated. There are two options, phone and internet, but the phone, we'll see this later in the global settings, is no longer supported with universal phone code. This is only supported by the legacy CmAct licenses, and therefore in this case it must be fixed internet. And then comes the interesting point of a CmAct license.
Yeah, then comes the binding method. So how should a CmAct license be bound to the computer? And there are 4 options that we offer here in this user interface, which is hardware, no hardware binding, binding extension, and smart bind. And to give you the answer already here is smart bind is the best choice because smart bind is a dynamic fingerprint. But let's start with the other ones and keep the best for last. Hardware. Hardware is, I would call it a legacy binding. This is the binding that we had with the old 5 million firm codes. And with the hardware binding, you are free to choose to which types the license will be bound to the motherboard, to the CPU, to the disk and network adapter. You could choose, I want to bind it to the CPU and to the network adapter. And you can define how many of these properties should remain the same. Maybe one and the other one can change. And then finally, you get the binding CN1. So bound to the CPU, bound to the network adapter, and one of the two needs to remain and the other one can be changed. And so this is something where you might have the feeling, oh, you can configure, it's deterministic for you and it's the best choice. But at the end, we found out that there are better options for reliability, better options for the security. And with SmartBind, we said we don't stick to these 4 options. We have a longer catalog of options and we mix them together in a more dynamic way. Because here, if you have a virtual machine, then you would get the same binding in the virtual machine and outside of the virtual machine. With SmartBind, we detect the environment. So if instead of using this legacy hardware binding, I go to SmartBind, there are no more options. CodeMeter runtime will detect, do I'm running in a Docker environment, a virtual environment in the cloud like AWS, like Azure, like Google, like Oracle? Is it a local virtualization system like VMware, OpenBox, virtual PC, something like this? Is it a Linux? Is it a macOS? Is it a Windows operating system? And then we automatically and dynamically create a fingerprint out of different properties. Could be software properties like contract numbers in the cloud environment. Could be hardware properties like the real hard disk serial number. Could be properties like a TPM chip. So could be properties depending on what is available. Then we add some tolerance to this smart bind, and tight means between 10 and 20%, medium about 35%, and loose around 50% tolerance, which means that from this dynamic fingerprint, 50%, or in the recommended case, medium, 30% can be changed. So that the license still gets valid or still keeps valid, even if some properties of the computer might be changed or might be temporarily not available due to driver reasons or other reasons. And so SmartBind and the setting, especially medium, gives a higher reliability and gives a better security because we dynamically adapt the fingerprint to the environment where the license should be activated. That's why my recommendation is don't use the old hardware binding. This is legacy, and I would definitely go to SmartBind, even if you feel more confident with the I can choose it. But with SmartBind, there's a big catalog, and we automatically choose the right one for you. There are 2 more settings: no hardware binding and binding extension. No hardware binding is something which can be used if you want to have no hardware binding. And I have 2 use cases in mind. Maybe there are more. One use case is you could create a trial license or free of charge license, and you want to give this automatically. So the customer should get your software maybe on a CD, DVD, should install it, and then could use it immediately. And so you also see this is a very old use case because in the current world you would offer it for download maybe. But let's come back to this CD DVD use case. User should install it and it should work on this computer for 30 days. And for this we can use this no hardware binding. I personally would prefer to offer software for download. And if you offer it for download, you could also do an activation process. If you do the activation process, you know who is using your trial, evaluation, demo, test version, and then your marketing, your sales could call them, could send them messages, could make special offers to them. So I'm personally a friend of having an activation for a demo version and not use the no-bind license, but it's a use case. The second use case is if you have real big accounts, key accounts, and you have some contracts where they want to have access to your licenses, even if you disappear from the market, something like an escrow agreement. And in this case, of course, if you disappear from the market, you are no longer available to create licenses. And that's why you could create such an no-bind, no hardware-bound license that they could be, this could be placed at a lawyer. And after some regulations, when you disappear, something like this, then your customer has access to this license. So it could be an emergency license in case you are no longer able to create licenses. And so there is the second use case where there's no hardware binding might make sense.
And the last binding mode is the so-called binding extension. This must be used if you use CodeMeter embedded, because in this case you need to implement the fingerprint calculation in a self-implemented adapter. We call it adapter, and the name of this adapter must then be entered into the extension name. So with software licenses in CM embedded, you need to use the binding extension as an binding method, because then you need to implement it by default by yourself. But there's a second use case which is called binding extension or runtime extension for CodeMeter runtime. And in this case, you say, okay, smart bind is cool, but there is a feature on my device which is unknown to WIBU. They cannot get this information, but I know it, and I want to bind my license exactly to this feature on my platform. And then you can write a library, binding extension library, which offers defined interface or function, and then you can add this to CodeMeter runtime. You need to enter the name of your library, and then every time a fingerprint is needed, CodeMeter runtime calls the function in your library, and you can calculate the fingerprint by yourself. But this is not used very often. It's really only the case if you say, okay, there is a feature that is only known to me, and SmartBind can't get to this information. And then you can use the binding extension. So, and those are all the binding modes we offer for software licenses, where the license container is tightly bound in all cases, beside of no hardware binding, is tightly bound to a machine or PC or whatever. The next section, operating system, I think this speaks for itself. You can define for which types of operating system this CM Act license container can be used. So you can say, I have a software that is only supported on Windows, and then you can disable Mac OS and Linux. And now the last section is the one with the interesting information, because there you can define some additional behavior of the CM container type. For example, if you want to allow the usage of a software container inside of a virtual environment. And in a virtual environment, you have the additional option if you allow the usage of a snapshot. So the more flags you set, the less secure your container will be, because with virtual environments, there are some additional features like creating snapshots and setting back to a snapshot. And if you take a use case where you have a license with a usage counter, which is decremented in your software with every use of a specific feature, you could activate this license into a virtual machine, create a snapshot, and then use all the available units and afterwards restore this to the snapshot. And because of those limitations, we say, okay, usually we don't want to have CmAct license containers inside of a virtual machine. If you allow virtual machine, we are no fan of snapshots, and therefore you need to say, okay, but I want this. And if you activate those flags, you are responsible for the security stuff. We do the best we can, but the more virtual the environment is, the less easy is it for us to determine binding criteria. And the last one is if you want to use CmAct licenses in containerized environments like Docker, where you could activate a license inside of an image, and then the license would be available in every container you create in this containerized environment. And this makes it even worse. So there are use cases for these settings. I see them in my projects mainly inside of CI pipelines, where you want to do testing, and all the test environments are created automatically by the pipeline in containers. But usually we advise to do this very careful. Allow in virtual machines is okay. There we have even with SmartBind very good recognition of the environment. But if you allow snapshots or containerized environments, you must be aware that the security of the CmAct container will go down.
Yeah, and the last two missing parts are allow the re-import of an update file. So the code meter system means that we create a fingerprint of the computer, of the cloud installation, or of the dongle. This fingerprint is sent to License Central. We call this a RAC, Remote Activation Context File. And then it creates an update file, and then this update file can be imported to this computer, this dongle, or this cloud server. And the question is, can I use the same update file multiple times? So what happens if the container was destroyed? And this is something especially for a CmAct license. So maybe the user cleans up the program data folder where we store our containers, and then this file is the license file is lost. And so the question is, can I import the same update file once again? For SmartBind licenses, this makes no sense because this would not work. But for the binding extension or for the no-bind license, this is an option which could be turned on and turned off. And this would allow to import the license and to restore the container again, even if the container was accidentally removed from the computer. In case of SmartBind, we recommend to do a reactivation that we talk about later. And last but not least, under Windows embedded operating systems, there are three types of write filters: enhanced write filter, file-based write filter, and universal write filter. And the universal write filter, UWF, is something that we handle automatically. So there is no setting, because the universal write filter has no influence on the security. It is as secure as without this write filter. The other two need special handling, and the special handling lowers the security because here we cannot write directly to the disk, so we need to have an exception. And typically, when we import this update file, we write a license file and we write some hidden values, generation IDs to different places at the computer, hidden on the computer. And this wouldn't work if this EWF and FBWF is activated. And that's why there's a special mode that we put all this information, even the hidden information, to public folder. And of course, this lowers the security because by copying, making a backup of this public folder, then returning the license and restoring the public folder, we would have the license twice. And that's why this is a feature that you can turn on if needed, because it will lower the security. The universal write filter automatically works by default because this has no influence on the security, and that's why the universal UWF is not mentioned here, because this automatically works. And with these settings, I think let's go back to SmartBind.
Yeah, because As I said, the container is bound to the PC or the system, and the files are stored somewhere on this system. And with SmartBind, we have a nice feature because something can happen to the system. You can have a crash. You can the disk can crash, whatever, and then you need to set up the new system. And with this, the files where the license information is stored will vanish from your system. But most of the system is still the same. It's the same computer. For example, it has only a new hard drive. And therefore, you can say, okay, I want to be able to restore my licenses or the container content on the exactly same computer. And therefore, you can enable this automatic restore, which only works for SmartBind. And there you have 5 different features of a PC where you can choose how many you want to have identically, that you say, oh, this is still the same machine. You can say which number of features must be identically. So in this case, Rüdiger said, I want to ignore the network adapter. The computer name must be the same, and at least 2 of board, CPU, and disk must be the same as before. And then CodeMeter License Central would say, this is the same computer. And in this case, you will be able to create a new CmAct license container on this system, which contains afterwards the same licenses as the one container which was lost during the crash. And in addition to the matching features, you can say how many restores you allow per default. For example, one restore, then you don't have any support processes. The customer can click on restore automatically, and you can define a number of days how often you want to allow a new restore, which is then added to the available number. And you can either limit this with a value, or you can say, I don't care, I don't want to have any support hassle with this software. I allow as many restores on the same system as the customer wants.
Yeah, a typical use case for this is the classroom scenario. So where you have a school, and every Monday the computer gets wiped and reinstalled completely from the scratch or via an image. And in this case, of course, the license would get lost if it was pre-installed. And so it needs to be restored once per week. And so a setting for this classroom would be once per week. So one more restore after 7 days. And the initial amount of restore 1, and maybe this is a good idea for this classroom scenario. By the way, a better solution is having a dongle, because then you don't need to do the restore in the classroom scenario, or having a local network server, so you can wipe the computers, but you keep the network server. Network server could be a small Raspberry Pi, for instance. Or you're using a CodeMeter cloud license, which is in the cloud. So even after the wiping of the computer, it's still there. And so having this CmAct license in the classroom is a use case, but there are better solutions for this use case with the dongle, with the network server, and with the cloud license. I think we keep the settings here and say, okay. And now, after going through the container type settings, let's have a brief look at the global settings, which we see here. Global settings have different sections. The first section is let's say, the license defaults. And let's start with the first 2 of them, split allowed and deactivation allowed. And split allowed, a license could have numbers, counters. There are 2 types of counters, which is the unit counter, which can be used for pay-per-use. So for instance, you give a unit counter of 100, and this is 100 printouts, 100 scans, 100 import processes, export processes. So you define this can be used, and after the usage, if it is empty, you need to purchase more. Second one is the license quantity, which is a floating network counter. So you give the user a 10-user floating network license, which can be installed on a server, and 10 users can use it as a floating license at the same time. If the 11th user wants to use it, he gets the message, sorry, all licenses are in use. And so if you are using one of the 2 counters, You can define if the user could split them into partly quantities. So maybe the user gets 100 units, and should he be able to split this into 50 and 50, or 50, 25, 10, 10, and 50, something like this. And with the split allowed, you can offer the customer to do this split himself. If you disallow the split, the user cannot split the license, he can only use it. And if the customer wants to have it in smaller portions, then you need to create smaller portions of licenses and sell these smaller portions already to him. This is typically a question of your license model. So if your license model says 10 single user licenses have the same price, then one license with 10 floating users, then splitting might be an easy feature because it has no influence on your business model, and you simply say, okay, you get 10 licenses and then you can distribute them like you want. But if, of course, if there is a difference in your price list, I would not allow the split. So this depends on your license model. Deactivation allowed is something which I recommend to turn on. So deactivation means if the license was activated on one target, that you are able to deactivate it, so safely remove it from this dongle, this cloud container, this computer, and you can activate it on a different one. So especially if you speak of a CmAct license, so this is a very good use case that the user can rehost a license himself. And if, for instance, a use case, you sell a software to Australia and the user wants to use a dongle, but you need to ship the dongle, and so it takes a couple of days until the dongle arrives in Australia, but the user wants to use the software immediately. So you can already activate it with a CmAct license, use it immediately, and as soon as the dongle arrives, you could rehost it from the CmAct license to the dongle and then use it mobile and flexible offline. And so these are use cases where deactivation might be a good idea, and in most of my projects, deactivation is allowed.
Yeah, same goes for my projects. I only have one where deactivation is globally not allowed. The next setting, enable activation by phone. I already mentioned it is with the container types. With the old CmAct license only firm code, the 5 million firm code, there was an option to say, I want to be able to activate licenses via phone. In this case, very short number was calculated in CodeMeter runtime, and this number could then be told via phone line to the software vendor, and with this information the license activation could be done. I never had it in one of my projects because at the time I joined WIBU, Universal Firm Code was already established, and new projects usually only use the Universal Firm Code, and therefore I never had this in one of my projects. The next setting, enable equally named order-defined parameters, is a kind of weird setting. For this, I need to make a short excursus into the item creation, which we cover, by the way, in the next webinar in detail. An item defines how a license is created, and technically a license consists of a firm code and a product code. So our recommendation is to say every item has exactly one product code. So if I create a license for this item, one product code is programmed into the target container. But CodeMeter License Central unfortunately offers the option to put more than one product code in one item. And because not every value is fixed in this item creation, but only known during the creation of the license, which is then called an order in the CodeMeter License Central mechanisms, you have so-called order-defined parameters where the real value of the license will be given during the order. And in such a scenario, one item with multiple product codes, and those product codes have order-defined parameters, you may have the same value for different product codes, because you want the same expiration time for every product code, and you don't want to have 5 times to enter the expiration time, and then you say, I allow equally named order-defined parameters in this scenario. But as I said, we don't recommend to use this, because in all the projects I ever saw, this makes more trouble than it gains positive stuff. We will cover how to handle this when we go into the item creation, because there is a feature which is called bundles or module items. And with this, you can reach the same goal with much easier setups.
Yeah, this was already a teaser to one of the next webinars where we continue with license central settings, and then we go to the configuration of the different items in detail. But let's continue here. Container type switch allowed. So if you assign multiple container types to one item, then your user can choose between I want to activate it to a dongle, I want to activate it to a CmAct license. And if the container switch type is allowed, if the user activated to an ACT license, he lost the ACT license, then he can immediately activate it to a dongle. If the computer type switch is not allowed, the user can activate it once again only to the same container type, to an ACT license. But if deactivation is allowed, you could deactivate and then activate to a dongle. And so you see the setting typically makes no sense, because if you allow deactivation, then the user can at least get to the dongle, and why not let him getting to the different container type with one step? And that's why I typically say keep this setting on and keep it on and forget about it. License shortage on license borrowing. So there are two features, license move and license borrowing, where a license can be transferred, moved, borrowed on the local system. Let's start with the borrowing. And this means you give the user a 10-user floating network license, for instance, and then one user could borrow a license for 30 days, 7 days, a time frame that you decide. And the question of the setting is, what should happen if the administrator wants to rehost the complete license server? And there are different things. Could you deactivate the license already while all licenses or while licenses are borrowed? And if you are able to deactivate them, can you activate them already before the borrowed licenses expired? And this setting is for the first one. This is for if the administrator needs to collect all licenses before he can return the license. And of course, then he can immediately activate the license somewhere else. And so if the allow shortage on borrow is deactivated, this means the administrator first needs to collect all licenses before he could rehost the server. And if you activate it, the administrator can already deactivate the server, but he needs to wait until the other licenses are expired until he can activate it on the next system. And we are working in one of the next versions to have this also as a setting that you can already allow to activate licenses previously, which means the user would have multiple licenses at the same time, but with more comfort to the user.
Moving of licenses is a very special use case. In this case, you activate the licenses from CodeMeter License Central to a transfer medium, usually a CM dongle, but it could be a computer as well, a service technician's computer. And then you go with this transfer medium to the target system and then move the license from this medium to the target system where the license should stay. And as I said, it's a special use case because it has some downsides, because License Central only knows I activated the license to this dongle. It does not know that in the meantime, the license has been removed from this dongle and is stored on some system on the shop floor. And therefore, you need to explicitly enable if you want to use this mechanism with moving of licenses, and then you can do this in the global settings. And the last one is similar. TMR is the high availability solution for CodeMeter license servers. TMR systems are usually used by large accounts, automotive vendors, for example, which say, oh, I can't have a license server outage because then I can't produce any cars, and therefore they set up a TMR system, a high availability. And if you want to offer this to your customers, you need to enable this in the global settings. And those are, in general, the license settings, the defaults for the license. But you have to keep in mind any changes to these global settings take only effect for newly created licenses afterwards. So no problem in our scenario because we have a completely empty code with a license central. But if you have an existing license central and change something in the license defaults, it won't affect all licenses you already have created. And one example is if you don't have deactivation allowed on, and you say, oh, I want to use this use case in future licenses, but you already have licenses where deactivation is not possible, then you need to replace all the existing licenses after you activated the setting with new licenses so that the deactivation will be available afterwards. So that was the first part of the global settings. Now let's take a look at the section which handles the support cases.
Yeah, and there are a lot of automatic actions in License Central, and some of them can be configured here. The first one is the reactivation behavior. So typically, let's go through some definitions. If a license was created, you can activate a license. This means you transfer it from License Central to a local computer, to a local dongle, to a cloud. Then you can deactivate a license, which means giving it back, returning it back from the CodeMiner container to License Central. And then we speak again of an activation. So the user activates the license, he deactivates, he activates, he deactivates, he activates. And now let's assume the license is activated and the license gets lost. In this case, when you activate the license, which is already activated, we call this a reactivation. So this is our definition. This is not a global definition that you can find in Wikipedia or somewhere else. This is the WIBU definition, how we are using these terms. And the reactivation means the old license is now lost, stolen, removed, broken, or something like this. And the new license replaces the old license. The new license is the only valid one, and the old one is, as mentioned, lost. And the question is, what should happen with the old license? And the default setting, no automatic action, is something that I would never recommend. So my favorite would be the setting the complete container on the blacklist. This means that if you authorize a reactivation, or if a reactivation is possible and the user does the reactivation, the container where the old license was located, is automatically put on the blacklist. And later on, if your software, maybe an automatic activation wizard, is checking for something, then this blacklist is automatically enrolled, and the container is, or your firm item, so your licenses in this container, are locked automatically. The other option is a withdraw license. Withdraw license means not locking the complete container, but only removing this license from this container when it is connected to License Central for the next time. So this is a less hard method to get all the licenses back. This is also okay. So I personally prefer to use the blacklist, because then you also can see in License Central if it was delivered, if the blacklist really locked the container. And so with the blacklist feature, you can see more. With the withdraw license, with the current License Central, it is not easy to see if the withdrawal really took place. And that's why I personally prefer the locking of the complete container with the blacklist.
Yeah, the benefit of this setting is that the container can be removed from the blacklist, or you can unlock it afterwards. But if you withdraw the license, it really is destroyed afterwards, and you need to issue new ones. The next setting, automatic update handling, is a quite cool feature of CodeMeter License Central, because it helps you to keep track where the license is, in which status the license is currently. We speak, Rüdiger said very often activation, deactivation, and all this stuff. And those consists of different steps, and therefore the status of the license changes during these steps. In the first step, the license is created, and then an update file is sent out to the target container. And then CodeMeter License Central said, oh, I delivered the license. But it has no knowledge of if the license is really activated in this container. So if it really was transferred to the container. And this information can only be retrieved if the container sends back a new context file. We call this context file, which contains an inventory of the container and some key values. And with those values, CodeMeter License Central can see, this license is really in this container. And then it sets the status from delivered to confirmed. And this is something you see in the license history, and then you can see in support processes, yeah, the license was delivered, but I don't know if it's really there. And then you could say, I send out the update file again if the customer complains that the license is not available. And such updates file can only import it directly in that container which requested the license. So this is nothing which leads to a multiplication of licenses. So there are workflows where you only send out update files, because especially in offline scenarios, it's one additional step to create a new context file and send it back to CodeMeter License Central. And therefore, you only send out new update files. We call it push licenses, so that the new stuff can be activated to the container, but you usually don't care if it is really activated to the container, because usually the customer takes care of the updates he gets. And if now a newer context file comes back from a specific container, CodeMeter License Central sets this, checks its information. Are there any delivered licenses? They are really in this container, and then it automatically sets the status from delivered to confirmed without you need to do anything in the background.
Yeah, a second advantage of this update handling, if the automatic update handling is turned on, the ticket license ID, so a unique identifier of the license, is written to every created license. And this identifier is the unique ID of the license plus the generation ID. We told you already the reactivation. If you reactivate the license, it creates a new generation of the license. And so in every license, there's a marker about its generation and its ticket license ID, so the unique ID in License Central. And so in the beginning, we taught you about security of the in a virtual machine, security in a Docker environment. And if you're using this, in this case, your software could read out the information and could collect the data and could send the data within your communication protocol. So due to compliance and security reasons, CodeMeter does not send any information to any server. So this is something that we won't do, we will not do, we never did. And so you can collect the information about the used license on this machine. You could collect the information inside your software, and then you could find out, oh, a duplicate is running on this virtual machine, a duplicate is running in this Docker container. And so this is a cool feature which gives you also additional options of detecting licensing breaches. At the end, I would say automatic update handling, you should definitely turn it on. And the next feature is something you definitely should turn off. Accept external created license entries. As Jörg mentioned, with the automatic update handling, License Central knows which licenses are in a CodeMeter container. every license with this firm code was created from this CodeMeter license central. And if we find out, oh, the container has a different update counter or different status, which is the update counter at the end, we say, oh, we need to redeliver the missing updates and everything is fine. We do handle everything automatically. The system breaks if someone is changing your licenses, your firm codes outside of CodeMeter License Central. So if you would have a second license central, like an emergency license central, testing license central, you're using the same firm code, the same CMAC IDs. In this case, this would break this automatic update mechanism and would lead to an unexpected state. Or if you have a firm security box and you're using CMBox, PGM, or license editor to change an already existing license, this would also lead to an unexpected state. Here with this, you have the option to say, if there's an unexpected state, I don't want to get any information, I don't want to have any interaction, please automatically accept this unexpected state if you turn this feature on. But our experiences, Jörg and me, is that if you turn this feature on, you would get trouble later on. Because if such a state is accepted, the previously activated licenses can no longer be returned. This automatic update no longer will work in a perfect way. And so at the end, if you say, I accept this automatically, you would have one click less, but you would have more trouble at the end. And if you say, I don't accept this, this means if it happens, you need to go to License Central, you need to check the container, you need to either can click manually on I accept this, so you got to the same result, or you say I accept it and I will recycle the container, so I will clean up all licenses and start fresh again new, which is our recommendation. So if you want to reuse the container and it had an unexpected state, just accept it, clean it, and then reuse it completely. And so this is our recommendation, and that's why don't turn this feature.
Yeah, I usually see this unexpected state only in customer environments where you have a test in a license central and a productive license central, and then you mix up your container between those two, and at one point you get an unexpected state. But I go with Rüdiger. Never accept this automatically. Analyze the problem and take your measures. Then it's easier than to run after the problem at one later point in time. So the last setting for the support area is generate log license for blacklisting. This is dependent on the reactivation behavior, or if you set a container automatically manually to the blacklist, and it's a kind of honeypot license. So for this container, a new license is created as an auto update license. So if this container ever appears again on CodeMeter License Central, it will be activated, but it will shown in tools as well. If you have a software activation wizard, or if you use Web Depot, you will see this license, and it should lead the customer into a trap. So you should need some kind of license ID which is known to the customer, which matches your patterns that you use. The license name should be something that is similar to your software licenses, so the super ultra edition of something, so that the customer thinks, oh, they made a mistake, they gave me by accident a new license. I want to activate this, but the main purpose of this license is to enable the log from the blacklisting. And therefore, if you use blacklisting, it doesn't matter if you set up this or enable this setting as well. I have some projects where it is on. I have at least as many projects where it is not on. And those are the actions that can be chosen for support cases. There is one thing we want to shortly mention is the order creation, because usually CodeMeter License Central creates the order numbers automatically. And this is usually a good feature, and it only affects the UI, because if you use automation from SAP or Salesforce or whatever with the SOAP communication, you always can override the order and use your own order number. But there are sometimes scenarios where you say, okay, I want to use the automation from my ERP system, but they don't have the resources to enable it immediately or implement it immediately. And then you can say, okay, I disable the automatically order creation, and in this case, in the UI, you are forced to enter the order number. And in this case, during the time you create the orders manually, your sales team is forced to enter the order number of the ERP. And that's the whole purpose of this setting.
Yeah, and from the last two sections, we will only pick a few. I think most of them are very clear. Timeout session, default language. If we speak of the enabling customer account, so this is something which is typically handled in License Portal. So if you want to have the option that your customers can log in, you have resellers, you might want to connect it to your existing single sign-on. So this is something which can be done very easily in License Portal, and this is, I would call this a legacy feature, the customer account in License Central, which has a limited functionality. So if you go for customer accounts, please check with our colleagues to the usage of the License Portal. And last but not least, enabling of the import file or data import from a file. If you compare CodeMeter to other dongles, if you did this in 10 years ago, other dongles said, oh, you need to write a lot of stuff into the memory of the dongle. The more you write, the more secure you get. We think this is voodoo, this is snake oil, because it simply says doing something which is weird, which is strange. And we said we are using cryptographic functions. So if you create a license, this license has an internal key. We call this a product item secret key. And with this cryptographic method, you could use, according to standard recommendations, you could use cryptographic methods to protect your software against piracy. So you could encrypt your complete application, you could encrypt some parts of the application, some data file, you could create cryptographic requests and check the cryptographic answers. So from our point of view, reading and writing data into a dongle does not offer any additional security. And we had a lot of customers who wanted to switch from the competition to CodeMeter, and they say, but we did writing into the memory in the past. We want to do writing into the memory in the future because we believe this is the best way. Okay, it's not a standard way. I think I would personally say this is voodoo, but they want to keep with their existing writing and reading from the memory, and to make it easy for them to migrate to CodeMeter, we offer this feature that their data could be imported easily to hidden data, and that's why it is on. But we didn't want to use the customers who want to use our recommendations on the wrong way, and that's why it's a hidden feature and it needs to be turned on. And so this is a story behind the enable data import from file. So it's is there to help customers to continue with voodoo they did in the past with our competition. But if they want to do it in a better way, of course they can still already do it in a better way. And the email, of course, quite easy. License Central sends emails only for resetting passwords. If you want to have some notifications where customers get email for different events, then License Portal will solve this. So a small teaser for License Portal for enabling customer accounts or sending emails to your customers. Yeah, and I saw Jörg already had a few questions in the chat, and he already answered a few questions in the chat. Are there some questions left, Jörg?
Yeah, there is one question which refers to the CodeMeter container types. The question was, why should I create more than one CMake license container? Is there really a use case, or is there a need to do this?
A need to do this is if you want to use different bindings. So for instance, if you say I have For key customers, I want to allow binding inside a virtual machine, and for default customers, I don't want to allow this. Then you need to create two container types. With the CmAct ID, you could distinguish between the two container types, and you can either define that you have different items in License Central, or in License Portal, you have some rules that some of the container types are filtered out and not displayed to some special groups of customers. And so this is one option. And another reason to do this, for instance, if you want to do some internal tests and you want to do the internal tests even with resetting to a snapshot of a virtual machine, because this is something you do in your CI pipeline. And then, of course, you need some container type which allows this resetting to a snapshot with the lowered security, and you use this for internal test items. And but of course, for customers, you don't want to allow them to restore licenses to a snapshot. And this is another reason why using different container types. So different container types, typically, if you have different binding strengths for different customer groups, internal groups, partners, and so on. Yeah, last but not least, a few words for an upcoming event. In a few days, on the 25th and 27th of June, 2024, we have an event in Karlsruhe, which are the CodeMeter Inno Days, which consists of multiple sessions, of roundtables, of sessions about the products, of generic sessions, and it's a hybrid event, so parts of the event will be streamed online. Streamed online is the roundtable where we talk about the future of software security, of cybersecurity, with a lot of experts from other companies. And the sessions about our product, which are from Axel Engelmann about protection technology, and from me about licensing processes with License Portal, how to ease this and how to handle this. So this we like to invite you to this event. And with this, I would say thank you. Thank you very much for your time. We wish you a nice day, a nice evening, a nice week, and seeing you again soon, maybe at Inno Days, maybe at the next webinar. Thank you.
Same from my side. One small correction. Rüdiger said by accident 27th. It's of course the 25th, 25 and 26th of June, the Inno Days. So bye-bye. Maybe we hear you there or see you there, and or in any upcoming project in the future. Goodbye.